My name is Grace. I am 28 years old, and this is my story. It is not an easy story, but it is a true one. For as long as I can remember, I lived in a big brick building with many other children. It was called St. Jude's Orphanage. The walls were tall. The hallways were long. Our beds stood in long, neat rows. Life was a routine. We woke up at the same time every day. We ate the same food on Tuesdays. We went to bed when the bell rang. It was not a bad life, but it was not a life with a family. Many children at St. Jude's did not remember their parents. They were too young when they arrived, but I was different. I had one thing, one small, precious thing, a silver locket on a thin chain. It was always cold against my skin. The outside had tiny flowers carved on it, but inside it was empty. There was no picture. Mrs. Gable, one of the caregivers, told me it was with me when I was found. I was just a baby, left on the steps of the orphanage. The locket was my only connection to my mother, my only proof that I came from somewhere, that I belonged to someone. Every night, I would hold the locket in my hand. I would close my eyes and I would dream. I dreamed of my mother. In my dreams, she was beautiful. She had a kind smile and warm eyes. She smelled like flowers. In my dreams, she didn't want to leave me. She had to leave me. Maybe she was poor. Maybe she was sick. But she loved me. I was sure of it. She would come back for me one day. This dream was my secret. It was my hope. It kept me warm on cold nights. I watched other children get adopted. A happy couple would come. They would smile. They would take a child's hand and walk away to a new life, a life with a mom and a dad. I was always happy for them. I really was. But when the big door closed, a part of my heart felt heavy. I would go to my bed and hold my locket tightly. My mother is coming for me too, I would whisper to the empty space inside. One day, years passed. I grew up. I learned to read and write. I learned to be quiet. I learned to be independent. When I turned 18, my time at the orphanage was over. It was the rule. I had to leave. I was scared. The world outside the orphanage walls was big and unknown. Mrs. Gable gave me a hug. "Be a good girl, Grace," she said. Her eyes were sad. I packed my few things in a small bag, my clothes, a book, and my silver locket. I put it around my neck. I would never take it off. I found a small room to rent in the city. It was tiny, just a bed, a small table, and a window that looked out at a brick wall. It was lonely. The quiet was so loud after living with so many children. I found a job at a small cafe. I washed dishes and cleaned tables. The work was hard. My hands were always wet. My back was always tired, but it was a job. It gave me money for rent and food. Every day I worked. Every night I came home to my empty room. But my dream was not empty. My dream was alive. Now that I was free, I could finally start. I could find my mother. This was my real job now. my life's purpose. I didn't have much information. I had my birthday and the name of the orphanage. That was all. I went to the city records office. It was a big, dusty building filled with old books. I told the woman at the desk my story. She looked at me with tired eyes. "Child records are sealed," she said. "It is the law. We cannot give you any information." My heart sank. "Please," I begged. "There must be something." She just shook her head. "I'm sorry," she said. I felt so defeated. It was like hitting a brick wall. But I couldn't give up. I spent my free days at the library. I looked through old newspapers from the year I was born. I read about accidents. I read about fires. I looked for any story about a baby being left. I found nothing. The years started to pass. I was 20, then 21, then 22. My small room started to feel like a cage. My job at the cafe was the same every day. Wash clean, smile at customers, go home. The dream of my mother was the only colorful thing in my gray life. Sometimes, late at night, I would feel hopeless. Maybe I would never find her. Maybe I should just stop dreaming. But then I would touch my locket, and I knew I couldn't stop. I had to know. One afternoon at the cafe, an old man sat at one of my tables. He had kind eyes and white hair. He came to the cafe often. He always ordered black coffee and read the newspaper. His name was Mr. Henderson. He saw me looking at a map one day during my break. "Where are you traveling to?" he asked with a smile. I felt shy, but I told him, "I'm not traveling. I'm looking for someone." And then, I don't know why, I told him everything. About the orphanage, about the locket, about my dream. He listened quietly. He didn't interrupt. He just listened. When I finished, he looked at me for a long time. "That's a heavy burden for a young person to carry," he said softly. Mr. Henderson used to be a journalist, a reporter. He knew how to find information. He knew how to look for people. "The city records office is one way," he said, "but there are other ways." A little flame of hope started to burn in my chest again. He started to help me, on his own time. He taught me how to search online databases. He showed me how to look through public records. We spent many weekends at the library together. He was patient and kind. He became my friend, my only friend. He was like the father I never had. One day, he had an idea. "The hospital," he said. "Let's check the birth records at the main hospital for the week you were born." We went to the hospital archives. It was a small, dusty room in the basement. It took us days of looking through old, fragile papers. My eyes hurt from reading the tiny handwriting. And then we found it. A record, a baby girl, no name, born on my birthday. And next to it, a mother's name, Lillian Vance. My breath stopped. Lillian Vance. I said the name out loud. It felt strange on my tongue. Real. My mother had a name. I started to cry. Tears of joy. Tears of relief. After all these years. A name. Mr. Henderson put a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Well done, Grace," he said. "This is the first big step." That night, I couldn't sleep. Lillian Vance. I whispered her name to the darkness in my room. It felt like magic. With a name, everything felt possible. The next day, Mr. Henderson and I searched for her name online. We typed Lillian Vance into the search bar, and my world changed forever. The screen filled with pictures of a beautiful woman. She had dark hair and bright, smiling eyes. She was an actress, a famous actress. There were pictures of her on red carpets, wearing beautiful dresses. There were articles about her movies. She was rich. She was famous. She was successful. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. This was my mother, my beautiful, famous mother. The dream I had in the orphanage was true. It was more than true. She wasn't poor or sick. She was a star. I felt a surge of pride, of happiness. It was overwhelming. I started to read everything I could find about her. She lived in a big city, far away. She lived in a beautiful house. The article said she was very private. She never married. She had no children. My heart ached when I read that. She has me, I thought. She just doesn't know it yet. I imagined our reunion. I would find her. I would show her the locket. She would look at me and she would know. She would cry. She would hug me. She would tell me she was sorry. She would tell me she had been looking for me too. We would have so much to talk about. So many lost years to find. "Grace, we must be careful," Mr. Henderson said gently. He saw the excitement in my eyes. "A famous person's life is very complicated. This might be a shock for her." But I didn't want to be careful. I was too happy, too hopeful. For 20 years, I had dreamed of this moment. I was ready. I saved every penny I earned. It took me almost a year. I worked extra hours. I ate cheap food. Finally, I had enough money for a bus ticket to the city where she lived. It felt like the most important journey of my life. I said goodbye to Mr. Henderson. He gave me a long hug. "Call me no matter what happens," he said. His eyes looked worried. "I will," I promised. The bus ride was long. For 2 days, I sat and looked out the window. I watched the country change. The small towns became big cities. I held my locket in my hand the whole time. I felt so close. My new life was about to begin. The city was huge, bigger than I ever imagined. The buildings were so tall they touched the sky. There were so many people, all walking so fast. I felt very small, very lost. I took a piece of paper from my pocket. It had her address on it. I found it in an article online. I took a taxi. My hands were shaking. My stomach was full of butterflies. The taxi stopped in a beautiful, quiet neighborhood. The trees were tall and green. And then I saw it. Her house. It wasn't a house. It was a mansion. It was huge, with white walls and a big, black gate. It looked like a palace. I just stood there for a long time, on the other side of the street. staring. This was real. I was here. My courage started to leave me. Who was I? Just a girl from an orphanage, a girl who washed dishes. How could I walk up to that gate? What would I say? I felt a wave of fear. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe I should just go back. I touched my locket. It was cold against my skin. It had brought me this far. I couldn't stop now. I took a deep breath. I walked across the street. I stood in front of the big, black gate. There was a small box with a button on it, an intercom. My finger trembled as I pressed it. A voice came out of the box. A sharp, professional voice. Yes, can I help you? My voice was a small whisper. My name is Grace. I need to see Miss Lillian Vance. Do you have an appointment? The voice asked. No, I said, but it's very personal, please. Tell her my name is Grace. There was a long silence. I thought they would just tell me to go away. I held my breath. Then the voice said, wait. A few minutes passed. They felt like hours. Then I heard a loud click. The big gate slowly swung open. My heart was beating so fast, I thought it would jump out of my chest. I walked slowly up the long driveway. A woman in a smart suit was waiting at the front door. She did not smile. This way, she said. She led me inside. The house was beautiful and empty. It felt cold, like a museum. There were big paintings on the walls. The furniture looked perfect, untouched. The woman, who I guessed was an assistant, told me to wait in a large living room. I sat on the edge of a white sofa. I felt like I didn't belong there. Then I heard footsteps. I stood up, and she walked into the room. Lillian Vance, my mother. She was even more beautiful in person. She was wearing a simple, elegant dress. Her dark hair was perfect. Her face was perfect. But her eyes were not smiling. They were cold, cautious. She looked at me. She didn't say anything. Just looked at me, up and down. My throat was dry. I had practiced this moment in my mind 1,000 times. But now, I couldn't find any words. Miss Vance, I started. My voice was shaky. My name is Grace. I was born 28 years ago. In the city of Northwood. Her expression did not change. She just watched me. I reached for my neck and took off my locket. I held it out to her. My hand was shaking so much, the locket rattled on its chain. This was with me, I whispered. I grew up in St. Jude's orphanage, I think. I think you are my mother. She looked at the locket in my hand. For just a second, a tiny flicker of something crossed her face. Was it memory? Was it pain? I couldn't tell. And then it was gone. Her face became a hard mask. Her eyes were like ice. She didn't move closer. She didn't take the locket. She just stood there across the room. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet and sharp, and it cut me deeper than any knife. I don't know who you are, she said slowly, clearly. You must have made a mistake. No, I whispered. The hospital records, your name. I was very young, she interrupted. Her voice was cold. hard. I was a child myself. I had a life to build, a career. That part of my life is over. It is in the past, and it needs to stay there. She took a step closer, but not to hug me, not to comfort me. I cannot have you in my life, she said. The words were quiet, but they were so loud in the silent room. It would ruin everything I have worked for. Do you understand? Tears started to stream down my face. I couldn't stop them. This wasn't my dream. This was a nightmare. My beautiful mother, standing in front of me, was a stranger. A cold stranger who was looking at me like I was a problem. A problem she needed to solve. The assistant came back into the room. She was holding an envelope. Lillian took it. She held it out to me. Here, she said, this should help you. Start a new life. Forget about this. Forget about me. I looked at the thick envelope. It was money. She was trying to pay me, to make me go away. I don't want your money, I cried. I wanted my mother. A look of annoyance crossed her face. I am not your mother, she said. Her voice was final. That girl is gone. I am Lillian Vance, and Lillian Vance has no children. She turned to her assistant. Please show her out. Then she turned and walked out of the room. She didn't look back, not once. My dream of 28 years was over. It was broken into a million tiny pieces on the floor of that cold, beautiful house. The assistant gently touched my arm. Miss, you need to leave now, she said. Her voice was not unkind. Maybe she felt sorry for me. I walked out of that house. I don't remember walking down the long driveway. I don't remember the gate closing behind me. The world was a blur of tears. I found a park bench and I sat down. And I cried. I cried for the little girl in the orphanage who dreamed every night. I cried for the young woman who worked so hard to find her. I cried because the truth was so much more painful than never knowing. I took the locket in my hand. For my whole life, it had been full of hope, full of a beautiful dream. Now, it just felt like a piece of cold, empty metal. My mother was not lost. She did not want to be found. And she did not want me. I stayed in that big, lonely city for 2 days. I walked around. I didn't know where I was going. I felt completely empty, like a shell. My own mother had looked at me and told me to stay away. How do you recover from that? I felt worthless, unwanted. Finally, I found a payphone. I called the only person I could. I called Mr. Henderson. When he heard my voice, he knew. Oh, Grace, he said. His voice was full of warmth and sadness. Come home. Just come home. The bus ride back was a long, gray fog. I stared out the window, but I saw nothing. I felt nothing. Just a deep, heavy ache in my chest. When I got off the bus, Mr. Henderson was there. He didn't ask questions. He just opened his arms and gave me a hug. I stood there, in the middle of the bus station, and I cried in the arms of my old, kind friend. Healing is not a fast process. It is slow, and it is painful. There were many days when I didn't want to get out of bed. The pain was too big. The words, "Stay away," echoed in my mind. Mr. Henderson was my rock. He would make me tea. He would sit with me in silence. He let me be sad. "She gave you life, Grace," he told me one evening. "But she did not give you a life. You did that. You built a life for yourself out of nothing. You are strong. You are kind. Her choices, her fears, they do not define who you are. Her wealth and her fame do not make her a good person. Your heart and your resilience make you a good person." Slowly, his words started to sink in. I started to understand. My worth was not tied to her. I had survived before I knew her. I would survive after. The dream of a perfect mother was gone, and it hurt. But underneath the pain, something new was starting to grow. It was small, but it was there. It was my own strength. I still have the silver locket. For a while, I couldn't look at it. It represented a broken dream. But one day, I picked it up. I opened it and looked at the empty space inside. For so long, I wanted to fill it with her picture. But now I know that space is not for her. That space is for me, for my future, a future that I will build, a future that is not empty. My life is still simple. I still work at the cafe. I still live in a small room. But it doesn't feel like a cage anymore. It feels like a beginning. The family you are born with is not always the family that loves you. Sometimes, the family you find along the way is the one that matters most. I found a friend in Mr. Henderson. I found kindness, and I am starting to find myself. If you are listening to my story, maybe you feel lost too. Maybe you feel unwanted. Please know this. Your life is your story, not someone else's. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to cry. But you are stronger than you think. You can survive the heartbreak. You can write a new chapter. A beautiful chapter. Just for you. Keep going. You can do this too.